welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, a podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk Seven Kings Must Die. This is the film closure of the television series The Last Kingdom. We got 5 seasons of The Last Kingdom, and then they did Seven Kings Must Die to wrap up the story and not continue the television series. So this is basically them concluding the rest of Bernard Cromwell's books. I know he did 10 books. I am a very big fan of Bernard Cromwell, and I am slowly but surely working my way through all of his books. I've read some other series of his as well. He's a fantastic author. If anyone is looking for someone who writes amazing historical fiction, I would look into him for sure. Now, as far as Seven Kings Must Die, I will say this one for me was a little bittersweet. Obviously, we knew that this was probably not going to end particularly well because it is historical fiction. Alexander Draymond's character of Uhtred of Bebbanburg, we don't really know a lot of the ending of his life. There isn't much that takes place, and they do kind of hint at that. It is sort of similar in a way to Vikings and the story of Ragnar Lothbrok. We don't really have that much historical representation there, and as justly so, we don't have any historical documentation into exactly what happens to Uhtred of Bebbanburg past a certain point. And I do like in Seven Kings Must Die that they kind of left the ending a little bit open there so that you don't quite know. You kind of get this hint, I feel like, as to what you are assuming has happened to him, but you don't really get this definitive, stamp on it of this is the finale of his story. Really, it could kind of go in either direction. But I think that this really did wrap up the television show nicely. I think it was along the same production level. So it wasn't like a cheaply made film to wrap up a television series. It kind of reminds me a little bit, obviously completely different genres of things, but it reminded me of the movie Serenity, which was the movie finale to the television show Firefly, where maybe not everything happens exactly how you're hoping it will, but it does wrap it up nicely to where at least you get that good bit of closure. I will say the only part of Seven Kings Must Die that I didn't truly enjoy was the very, very, very tail end of it, where they kind of are panning out at the end and it shows the castle in Bebbanburg as it stands today. And as it's panning out, you get to see people, real day people, modern day people, and there's a parking lot and a whole bunch of cars, and I was womp. That to me just sort of pulled me out of being in that time frame, and I enjoy The Last Kingdom for the fact that it is a historical drama and it isn't modern day, and I don't personally enjoy when they do flashes like that where it shows kind of what it looks like now. I didn't mind them panning out and showing the castle there as the finale, but I wish that they had kept it a somewhat tighter shot so that you didn't necessarily get to see a whole bunch of tourists. I feel like that sort of ruined it a little bit for me, and if it was my own personal choice, I would not have ended it that way, but I do see why they did. Obviously, they want to show you that this was a real location. It was a real person that was fighting through a lot of the things that you got to see, in earlier series. So it kind of, wrapped it up into a neat little bow. It just was not a particular little sequence that I personally like. The Last Kingdom is one of those television shows for me that I thoroughly enjoyed every single season of, which I have to say, if we're looking at something that's sort of similar, I don't even think that the television show Vikings really did the same thing. And I don't think I was as satisfied with the closure of that one as I was satisfied with the closure of The Last Kingdom. For me, Vikings, the television series, ended with the death of Ragnar Lothbrok. I don't think that I've enjoyed like the seasons that came after that had a lot more to do with his sons, you know, Ivar and Bjorn and on all of that. I wish that they had kind of, for Vikings, done a little bit with what they did with the offshoot. I do not watch the spin-off series of Vikings Valhalla. For me, it's just not as interesting, but I wish that they had ended the Viking television series with the death of Ragnar Lothbrok and maybe done a spin-off then following his children, because then maybe it would have been a little bit more interesting to kind of see their stuff. But because I got so attached to like the story between like Lagertha and Ragnar, once he was gone, it kind of just wasn't as interesting. But that's just my own personal thing. I think that it's good that The Last Kingdom did end the way that it did, and they didn't stretch it out to the point where it lost its enjoyability, or they started to kind of change how things would have been historically just to kind of make it more interesting. So for me, The Seven Kings Must Die was a really good ending to the actual franchise of The Last Kingdom. And I'm very excited, honestly, to see, you know, what happens with Alexander Draymond and, you know, Mark Rowley and some of the other actors that have been playing in this show. I am hoping that they can land, if they want to, obviously, that they can land in other television series and we can see them kind of continue their careers, because I know there was a little bit of difficulty for some of the actors from like Game of Thrones, for instance, that they didn't quite land very great roles just because people kind of saw them perpetually as their characters from Game of Thrones. So I'm really hoping that some of the people from The Last Kingdom can branch out and do some other things. And I look forward to seeing them in some other stuff for sure. So those are my thoughts on The Last Kingdom, Seven Kings Must Die. I would love to know what you guys thought if you finished this series with this film. Subscribe if you want to join the movie nerd family. You can find me on Instagram at Cinematic Sarcastic Podcast, and I hope to see you in the next episode.